This is Sara, and today I'm going to read Chapter 13 of The Witch of the Blackbird Pond. To think you've never been to a husking bee, exclaimed Judith. Why, they're more fun than all the holidays put together. Just husking corn all the evening? It sounded to Kit like an odd sort of party. Her arms still ached from wrestling the heavy ears from the stalks, row after row, hour after hour. Oh, it doesn't seem like work when everyone does it together. We all sing, and Jeff Whitney brings his fiddle, and there's cakes and apples and cider. Oh, I always think autumn is the very best time of the year. They say the crop is not too plentiful this year, Mercy put in slyly. Could be there won't be as many red ears as usual. Judith tossed her head. I'll find one. Never you fear, she said lightly. I'll have my own methods. Red ears? Are they better than the others? At Kit's innocent question, her two cousins burst into peals of merriment. You wait and see, advised Judith. Come to think of it, I guess I'll make certain that William gets one too. Then you'll find out. At her own sudden suspicion, Kit blushed crimson. In a rare mood of intimacy, Judith linked arms with Kit as they sat along the high street to gather the last of corn in the meadow. It was more than the sparkling September air that accounted for their high spirits. I just feel it in my bones, she confided, that something wonderful is going to happen tonight at the corn husking. Judith's excitement was contagious. Kit began to feel a tingle of anticipation, though she still couldn't see how anyone could make a festivity out of hard, dusty work. It was the first party of any sort of which she had been invited to in Wethersfield. The few young people she had come to know, the ones she had seen at Sabbath meeting and lecture day, would all be there. I never knew you could predict the future, she laughed, but I hope you're right. I know I am, said Judith, because this time I'm going to see it that something happens. I made up my mind. You mean John Holbrook? Of course I mean John. You know how he is, Kit, so serious and shy. He'll never be able to find his tongue if I don't help him out. But John is still a student. I know. He hasn't any property like William, or any way to support me yet. That's why he doesn't speak. But I know how John feels, and I know how I feel, and why should we wait forever without even making plans? And what could ever be better time than a husking bee? Judith, Kit ventured doubtfully, do you really think? You'd better be thinking about your own affairs, laughed Judith. William isn't like John. He's like me. When he's made up his mind, he isn't going to wait forever. Why did Judith have to remind her? Kit thought wearily. Ever since the day of William's house raising, when the neighbors had gathered together, and working from dawn to sunset, had raised a fine imposing frame and nailed the sturdy new clapboards in place, Kit had known that William was only waiting a proper time to speak. She had long since decided what her answer would be. As William's wife, she could come and go as she pleased. There would be no more endless drudgery, and she could snap her fingers at a woman like Goodwife Gruff. Besides, William admired her, in spite of the fact that she was often wilder than scandalized. He was still infatuated, and he had been the first Sabbath morning. Then why did Judith's teasing her always raise this cold little lump of foreboding? She glanced longingly towards the little house by Blackbird Pond and promised herself that she would steal a few moments on his way home, but work as fast as she could. When she and Judith finished their task, there was only time for a flying visit. Prudence had always been there, Hannah told her, but had not dared to wait for a lesson. If only these old eyes of mine could make out the letters, Hannah regretted, but actually the child doesn't seem to need much help. She's just hungry for more to read. Poor little mite. I keep hoping the goat's milk will put a little fat on her bones. Judith was out of sight when Kit started along the south road, but to her surprise, she glimpsed a familiar wide black hat in the distance and paused to wait as John Holbrook came looping around the road to catch up with her. Dr. Brookley sent me to find some skunk cabbage, he explained, waving a bunch of green. This is a rare cure for asthma, he says. How do you come to be walking alone? Judith went ahead, she explained. Had he hoped to meet Judith on the road? I stopped to see Hannah Tupper. She said the name deliberately and was rewarded with startled eyes. The widow Tupper? Does your family know about that, Kit? Judith and Mercy know. Hannah is a good friend of mine. She's a Quaker. Does that matter? Yes, I think it does, he said thoughtfully. Not that I hold anything against the Quakers, but this woman has no proper reputation. She had been accused twice of practicing witchcraft. That's just cruel gossip. Probably, but I hate to see it turn against you too. You know, Kit, there are a few people here in town who still haven't forgotten the day you jumped into the river. If they find out that you're acquainted with a witch, John, how can you pay attention to so silly? Witchcraft isn't silly, kid. Dr. Bulkeley says. Oh, Dr. Bulkeley says, retorted Kit. I'm tired of hearing what Dr. Bulkeley says. Don't you ever think for yourself anymore, John? At the hurt in his blue eyes, she was instantly contrite. I'm sorry, she said, impulsively laying a hand on his sleeve. I didn't mean that really. But since you've been studying with that man, you seem to have changed somehow. At once he forgave her. You don't know him as I do, he explained. Every day I realize more how much you've changed and how much you have to learn. But it's not just the studies. We do change, Kit, in spite of ourselves. At least some of us do, he added, with the flash of humor she had missed in him lately. I don't want to preach at you, kid. It's just that the Quakers have the name for stirring up trouble, and it seems to me you managed to get into enough for yourself. I know, Kit argued cheerfully, but it's Hannah who's helping me change. If only you knew her. John walked beside her, listening earnestly as she tried to make him understand the lonely woman in the meadow. Presently, they reached a crossing at Board Street where John would turn towards the Dividend, and they stood for a moment, both unwilling to end this rare moment of companionship. John took off his hat, leaned his elbow on the fence post, stood gazing reflectively back at the meadows, the wind stirring his fair hair. All at once, he turned and smiled at Kit with the same unexpected sweetness that had warmed her the first day in Saybrook Harbor. 5 months, he said, since we came here together in the Dolphin. Such high hopes we had, you and I. It turned out well for you, hasn't it, Kit? A big fine house going up, and a good dependable fellow like William. I hope you'll be very happy. Kit colored and looked down at the browning grass. She did not want to talk about William. And you, John? She asked. Perhaps, he answered, and the smile lingered in the corners of his mouth. We shall see. Sooner than you think. Maybe, thought Kit. Are you going to the husking bee tonight? She inquired mischievously. I don't know, he considered. Will Mercy be there? Mercy? Why, no, I don't suppose she can be. It's more than a mile away. Then I think I shall spend the evening at your house instead. I seldom a chance to talk to her. But they say the husking bee is such... Slowly she began to realize what he had said. John, why shouldn't you talk to Mercy? His eyes twinkled. Why do you think I come so often? But I thought... We all thought. It's always been Mercy from the very beginning. Didn't you guess that? Oh, John! In a burst of incredulous joy, Kit flung both arms rapaciously around his neck. With a startled glance up the road, John tactfully freed himself. His very ears were pink, but his eyes were shining down at her. I'm glad you approve, he said. Do you think I have a chance, Kit? A chance? Just you try. Oh, John, I'm so happy I could dance a jig. I can't try it, he reminded her soberly. I have nothing to offer her. Nothing at all. You'll have a church of your own some day. Only... Can Mercy? Do you think she can manage a minister household? There are so many things Mercy can't do, John. Then I will do them for her, he said quietly. I don't want a wife to wait on me. For Mercy, just to be what she is, I could never do enough to make up for it. Then tell her, tonight, John, she argued, remembering the longing in Mercy's eyes. Perhaps, he answered. We shall see. Walking home past Meeting House Square, Kit could hardly keep herself from dancing. She wanted to shout and sing, Mercy and John Holbrook. How right. How exactly unbelievably right. How could she keep from telling somebody? They must see that she was bursting with excitement. Judith was surely... Judith. Her jubilant feet came suddenly to halt. How could she have forgotten? Ought she have said something to John, warned him somehow? No, she could hardly have done that, in the fairness to Judith. He was so completely unaware, so serious and shy, as Judith herself had said, so wrapped in his books and his dreams of Mercy that he had never even noticed that Judith had set her cap for him. What was this something that Judith was so sure was going to happen tonight? What sort of scheme did Judith have up her sleeve? Well, if he doesn't go to the husking bee, nothing can happen, she thought practically. And who knows, if he's there with Mercy, oh dear, Judith is going to mind terribly, but she's so proud. She'll put her nose in the air and pretend she never had such an idea in her head. And she'll get over it, I know, because John isn't really suitable for Judith, if only he will speak tonight. Judith lingered expectantly in front of the little mirror that evening. She was wearing the new blue wool dress for the first time. With snowy white collar and deep cuffs, she had never even looked lovelier. Her eyes were deep blue in the candlelight, the clear white of her staying flushed with sacred excitement. Kit fidgeted impatiently. It didn't matter how she looked. William was waiting already, and they must all get away quickly before John arrived. If only Aunt Rachel and Uncle Matthew could find something to do, and Mercy could be sitting alone at firelight. They were too late, however. John Holbrook stepped inside the door just as the two girls wrestled down the stairs, and his eyes were lovely with admiration as he waited, with a courtly bow, to let them go ahead of him into the kitchen. Judith tipped her back and head and smiled up at him provocatively. Rachel put aside her work, and even Matthew came to the door to see the young folks off. "I'm so glad you've come," Judith dimpled. "Now we can all walk together." "I'm not going to the husking," John told her, smiling. "I think I shall stay here and visit with Mercy instead." "But they're all expecting you. Mercy doesn't mind. Do you, Mercy?" John shook his head, still smiling. There was a reflection in Judith's excitement in his own pale face. "I think I shall stay here," he insisted. There's something I want to speak to your father about." His words were breathtaking effect. Judith took a step backward, one hand at her throat, and a wave of secret spread from her white collar to her black curls. "Tonight," she whispered in relief. Then suddenly joy came flooding past every doubt and restraint. "Oh, Father," she cried impiously, "he doesn't need to miss the husking, does he? You know what he wants to ask. Say yes, so we can all go to the party together." Matthew Wood was bewildered. "Why, daughter?" he rebuked. "What sort of talk is this?" "Shameless talk, and I don't care," laughed Judith, tossing her black curls. "Oh, Father, you must have guessed. John doesn't need to tell you." Such radiance was irresistible. And when he turned to John, he was actually smiling. "If you will come courting with such a headstrong, brazen girl," he said indolently, "then I can only give you both my blessing. Perhaps you can teach her some meekness." John stood dumbfounded, his pale face shocked completely colorless. He seemed totally unable to collect his wits. "Tell them," urged Kit, silently and desperately. "You've got to say something, John, right away." As if he had heard her, John opened his white lips and made a hoarse sound. "Sir, he attempted. Then, still incredulous, he looked back at Judith. Every trace of her pride and haughtiness was whipped from her face. Such utter happiness and thrust shone from those blue eyes that John flattered, and in that moment of hesitation was lost. William's heavy hand descended on his shoulder. Aunt Rachel held up both hands to him, with tears in her eyes. Then Mercy came down slowly from the hearth, her head up, and her great eyes clear and lustrous. "I'm so proud of you. I'm so glad for you both," she said warmly. Only Kit could say nothing. "Perhaps I dreamed of it," she thought, watching Mercy, but she knew she had not dreamed the love in Mercy's eyes that summer evening. No one but herself would ever know. She had counted on Judith's pride, but Mercy did not have Judith's pride. It was something much stronger than pride that upheld her. Presently, the four set out together into the still, frosty twilight. Judith took John's hand confidently, still carried quite beyond constraint and no worry of happiness. "You'll never know," she chattered. "You saved me from being the most outrageous hussy, John. I had a scheme, but I'm not sure I would have dared actually. But now what?" Kit asked, walking behind him. She ached with her own stiff protest. "He can't do this," she told herself over and over, but she knew that he could. John understood Mercy. He knew that she had never in her life reached her hand for so much as a crust of bread that Judith might want. If he should hurt Judith now, Kit knew Mercy would never forgive him or herself. Lost in her own thoughts, Kit barely noticed that William's dignified pace was even more deliberate than usual. They had dropped some distance behind the others, with a purposeful hand grasped her own elbow. "Wait a moment, Kit," said William. "Let them go ahead. I want to talk to you." The quiet resolution in his voice penetrated her racing thoughts. Reluctantly, she gave him a corner of attention. The intent look in his eyes, even the warning light, warned her that something was coming. "Oh, no. Not after all this had happened. She was tempted to run for the shelter of the fireside in Mercy. "I didn't mean to speak tonight," William was saying. "But those two, don't you invite their happiness, Kit?" "I can't bear it," she thought in a panic. The last two words escaped in a half-whisper. William took them literally. "Tomorrow, then. Let me speak to your uncle. You won't need me to help out," he added in unwonted humor. "I'm quite capable of speaking for myself." Kit stood shivering in the damp twilight. "The silk dress is not warm enough for England," she thought irrelevantly. Then she made an effort to gather her forces. William's question was not unexpected at all. She had thought her answer already. "Please, William," she whispered, "don't speak to him yet." William looked down at her, perplexed. "Why not? Don't you want to marry me, Kit?" She hesitated. I had thought not of getting married so soon. Judith is just 16. I know, but I'm still a stranger, William. There are so many things I have to learn. That's true, he agreed. There was a silent moment. I won't hurry you, Kip, he said reasonably. The house can't be finished before spring anyway. I'll wait for your answer. What her answer would be he seemed to have not in the slightest doubt. As they walked on, his hand remained on her elbow with a new possessiveness. Laughter spilled from the open door. The great barn was glowing with lanterns swinging from from the hand-hewn timbers. There was a fragrance of new hay and the warm, reassuring smell of cattle. The gaily dressed young people sat in a circle around the vast mound of silk-tasseled corn, and already the husking has begun. Shouts of welcome greeted the newcomers, and the circle shifted to make room for them. To Kit's surprise, the husking was fun, enlivened by singing and voigers and jokes that seemed uproariously funny. She was astonished. Withersfield was not always a dumb-selling place. Had her uncle ever been to a husking, she wondered? At all once a new shout went up. Judith sat with the half-shucked ear of corn in her lap, and from the ruffled silk peppled bright orange-red kennels. Judith laughed and tossed her back head with all one's arrogance. I haven't any need for a thing like that, she said promptly. What am I offered for it? Without waiting for an answer, she tossed it straight across the circle into William's hands. There were a few quick giggles, a hush of curiosity. Kit sat helpless, her cheeks on fire, and with the laughter and the cheering left her giddy as William stepped resolutely forward to claim his forfeit.